But welcome to Pennsylvania. Welcome to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are a Commonwealth and not a state. We are referred to as the Keystone State. And the Keystone was the keystone in an archway. And in the old days when they built archways out of stone, that keystone was that centerpiece that put enough pressure horizontally. We had a mechanical engineer here yesterday, but that keystone put enough pressure horizontally to keep the entire archway from falling vertically downward. And that was a keystone, and Pennsylvania is referred to as a Keystone State. Many believe it was because of its geographic location in the center of the 13 colonies, but that's really only part of it. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I do want to note that here in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania garnered the most votes for our presidential candidate out of all the 50 states in 2016 for Darrell Castle. And we intend to do the same this coming election. And Frank, we will be on the ballot in Pennsylvania in 2020. Pennsylvania has a unique piece to it, but you cannot ballot access for long periods of time. It's election by election in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, of course, is home to William Penn's The Holy Experiment. It's also home to the First and Second Continental Congress, out of which the Second Continental Congress, of course, came the Declaration of Independence. And it was also home to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. A comment about the Declaration of Independence, First and Second Continental Congress, I used to read in the old history books. It's not in the history books anymore, but I used to read that Pennsylvania was a breadbasket of the colonies. And the significance of that was, if you enjoy history, indulge me for a minute, I'll stay on track. British strategy during the War for Independence was to divide the colonies. A natural barrier was flowing north out of New York City, the Hudson River. And the Hudson River flew north, or flowed from north to south, but it is a barrier. And part of the British strategy when they occupied New York City was to starve those radical Paul Revere, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, to starve Boston into submission. Remember, they controlled the port of Boston, and then if they could control the overland route from the bread supply of Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, Lancaster area, they believed that they could starve Boston into submission, and with the loss of those radicals, the revolution, the fight for independence would fail. Hence, out of that came Benedict Arnold's treason, which was what the piece of land he tried to give away was a place called West Point, New York, 50 miles north of New York City. Significance of that was it would have given the British entire access to the Hudson River, controlling the flow of food supplies into the New England states during the War for Independence. A little bit of history there. Breadbasket of the colonies. Finally, I'm going to make mention, Cindy mentioned yesterday about passion. And I'm very passionate about our party and what we do and what we believe in. I think many of you know that I did serve 25 years in the Army, and I was a lifelong Republican, but I never left the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. And but I retired in 2006, April 2006. I moved back to my hometown. And in November, I was notified that I was called out of retirement and going back to Iraq. And I served my country for 708 days in Iraq. And at that point in time, I was a staunch Republican. And you conjure up the ideas and so on. But I went to Iraq, and I was wounded on day 708 and sent back home. And that's an entirely different story. It'd take me a long time to tell, and I'd cry. But anyway, while I was in Iraq, I was an advisor to the Iraqi government that we were trying to build up. I arrived in Iraq on the 23rd of April 2007, and that was during the build-up and what they called the surge. The surge wasn't a strategy, but it was a means of obtaining an end. But in any case, I would work with the Iraqi government officials. It was a hard job, and I was in the red zone every day. I was in the Iraqi government offices every day. And there was a lot to it. But I would frequently ask them because, and I don't mean to sound negative, I don't mean to sound critical, But it was a hopeless job. And I said when I went there, it would take 30 years, an entire generation, to change the culture if that's what we were going to do. And so I knew what I was up against, but I would frequently say to the Iraqi government officials, and I worked at the minister level, Minister of Interior, and the deputy ministers of Interior, and we're talking about in Iraq, Ministry of Interior is the Iraqi police forces. And I worked at that level. It'd be like working with Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, that sort of thing. And I would frequently ask them, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Because we had many get on board. And they were typically the educated Iraqis. And they would say, you don't understand. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for my children and my grandchildren. Now, it will still take 30 years to change the culture of Iraq if that's what our goal is. I'm not certain. We'll leave that there. But people, my own family, largely Republicans, will say, why are you doing this? Why do you care? I'm doing this for my children and my grandchildren. My efforts may not have fruit in my lifetime, but my Bible tells me that in due season we shall reap if we faint not. I'm not going to quit. I think I have the passion to keep going. Thank you. God bless you. Welcome to Pennsylvania.